Set Piece FC are at it again. Arsenal continue their good run of form with a 2-0 win over Manchester United. Are corners almost as good as penalties for Mikel Arteta's side? We'll look back at Wednesday night's triumph, break down the performance, try to make sense of why nobody can stop us scoring from set plays, and more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Delighted to say Mike Stavrou is back alongside me. How you doing, sir? Good to see you.
Yeah, good. It's nice to do a post-match one, because usually we're sort of doing like big picture, stuff. So nice to get a bit of match reaction. It was a good one in the end after a pretty bad first half. So yeah, excited.
We'll get into the first half in a minute because I completely agree with you. It was dull. It was dire. I've been having this kind of back and forth with my brother recently. My brother recently has taken his girlfriend to a few Arsenal games, and until last night, every time she'd come, Arsenal dropped points. And in the whole sort of week leading up to the game, I kept saying to him, don't bring her. It's not personal. Got nothing against the girl, but don't bring her because she's a jinx. Don't bring her. And he was like, no, I don't believe in that nonsense. And when I got to the game yesterday, I saw him arrive with her and I thought, okay, you need to break the jinx today. And at halftime, I texted him and I said, this is the worst Manchester United team in years. We can't create a chance. We can't break them down. We've got no zip, no tempo. We're playing like we were before the international break. Andrew, my brother's name, you've done it again. That's what I said to him. And he stayed quiet until after the game and then gave it back when we won the game, as he should. But yeah, I'm really superstitious with stuff like that. And the first half he was really, really terrible, wasn't it? Like there was just nothing about Arsenal in that half, and we'll come on to that in a second, but I do want to start with the point of, are we back in the title race in your opinion? Were we ever out of it? Where do you kind of stand on the whole title race chat?
I think it's really interesting because if you would have asked before the season, how is this first sort of 14 games going to play out, or for first sort of quarter and a bit third of the season, I don't think anyone would have thought that the table would look like this. Man City dropping off so dramatically, Liverpool being near perfect as you can get with a new manager. So I think the fact that we are not out of it at this stage, i.e. the gap isn't like 15 or anything insurmountable, is a good thing. It's not ideal, obviously. I think we'd be closer because ideally you want to be within 3 points of them so that when you play them, you can claw that back. But obviously the gap is a bit bigger than that. But I think for the first time last night, we saw that Liverpool are fallible because they've had let's be honest, they've had a ridiculous season. Like, I don't think anyone is saying otherwise. That start to come after the Jurgen Klopp era is ridiculous, really, because we've spoken about this on this pod before, but you look at how other clubs have fared post legendary managers leaving, like Ferguson, like us with Wenger, took a long time. And I know obviously there's different circumstances. Liverpool were in a much better position. Klopp left them in a much better position with a much healthier squad. But you just look at that transition, how sort of seamless it's been, and what slots added to what they already had. And it's been amazing, really. So to be, if you would have asked me, before this and the gap was 9, I would have said, this is a huge task, but it feels slightly better today. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. And I think last night was a bit of an emotional roller coaster because we knew that Liverpool were a goal down and then they equalised, and then they went 2-1 down and then they equalised again. And then they went 3-2 up, and you're starting to think, oh my God, this team are just relentless. They're not going to crack. They're not going to budge. But then when you kind of sit and think about it more and more, and you think about some of the performances from Liverpool over the course of the season, and I've watched a fair few of their games, I've never come away from a Liverpool game this season. Well, saying never is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but there's been a few occasions where I've come away from Liverpool games so far this season and gone, they've won, but they weren't totally convincing. And so I always kind of believed that they would drop points, and I think they still will drop more. And that's why I think obviously the door is open for Arsenal. But I'd be a hypocrite now if I said, after sort of taking 2 points out of their lead, we are back and we are back in this race. Like, I think Arsenal are back in terms of the way they're playing generally, But to say that we're back in the title race fully, I think is a bit of a I don't know, an Arsenal fan getting carried away, essentially, because I said when it was 9 points that we were out of it until we could prove otherwise. And I still think we've got to take a couple more steps in terms of taking chunks out of their lead before I will say, right, this is really game on. But it's Liverpool leaving the door open. It's Liverpool leaving that little gap that Arsenal will feel that if they're nimble enough and good enough, they can squeeze through and really sort of hunt Liverpool down. So yeah, I'm not going to go as far as saying we're back in the title race, but obviously what happened last night, and we were both involved in fixtures that were potential banana skins. I know people will look at Man United now and the struggles they had under Eric Ten Hag and Ruben Amorim coming in and trying to implement a new system and say, no, well, you should beat them. It's still Manchester United, and it still had the potential to be the kind of game where we drop points. And at half time, it felt like that was where we were heading. Zinchenko and Kivior both started the game. Obviously, Gabriel and Calafiori were unavailable. How concerned were you by that pre-game? And did your concerns spill over into the actual game as well?
I was shitting myself too. Not because of the opposition, and I did message you before in yesterday morning, and I said, Ari, we're gonna batter them. It was more so because of how we were playing, and then also the new managerial thing, the new system. I knew they would look, out of sorts. And it didn't really play out like that. So that first half, I was thinking, this is going to come back to bite me, isn't it? My overconfidence. But when I saw that team sheet, I was scared because I just thought, the foundation of this team is the defense, and that partnership between Gabriel and Saliba, and the fact it's not there is scary. And it's not even just that, but you're replacing half of the back four with Zinchenko as well. And I think it was Kivior's first start of the season in all comps, and I think it was Zinchenko's second start of the season. So these guys have not played a lot of football. So to slot in and play in a big game like that, under the lights, when we know Liverpool are playing at the same time, and we know that we have to win, is a really tough situation to go into. But I thought they equipped themselves really well. I think the caveat is, and we'll get on to Man United and how they played, but they didn't offer much in the first half at least, and I don't think they really offered much across the whole game, essentially. But they did what they needed to do, and I think with Kivior in particular, a lot of us wrote him off last season. The game against Bayern Munich, where he got ripped to shreds by Leroy Sané, a few other instances where he was at fault for goals, but really solid display. I'm not going to say that he's going to be our favorite player or anything, one of our top performers, anything like that. But if you know that you can stick him into a game against your rivals and he can do all right, that's what you can ask for, really. And we've spoken about Zinchenko being the third choice left back. So the fact that he's come in and does what he does, and I mean, look, I was nervous when he got skinned by Amad Diallo, to be honest, and he got that yellow card. I was like, please get him off right now. But other than that, I thought they were both solid.
Yeah, skinned is an understatement. He completely rinsed him, didn't he? Left him for dead. So I was in the press room before the game, and there was a rumor going around that Gabriel was out. And I wasn't, 100% sure whether I should believe that or not. I think there was an example a couple of weeks ago, actually. I think it was ahead of the Forest game, maybe, where one of these X accounts, I won't name them, that gives team news out, put something out that was completely inaccurate and had to delete it sort of 15, 20 minutes later. And so when I saw the rumors that Gabriel was out, I was a little bit like, do I believe this? I'm not sure. I feel like against Manchester United, Mikel Arteta and Gabriel would do everything within their power to make sure that he's available, because it's a big game and he's so important. And if he's not quite at 100%, I still think they'd risk it. That's how I was feeling about it. Then I heard that Calafiori was out as well. And I started to think, well, missing one is a problem, but missing two could be a major issue. It was never about Zinchenko or Kivior for me. It was about the pair of them coming in and essentially half of your back four being missing. I think Kivior did pretty well. I think it was clear in the first half that there was a bit of apprehension in their game. And I'm talking about both of them here. Kivior was a little bit reluctant to step forward the way that Gabriel does. And as a result, I don't think we was as aggressive as a team. I don't think we squeezed Man United up in the way that we normally do when we've got Gabriel and Saliba at centre-back. And Zinchenko, I found his performance in the first half, Mike, I don't know what you think about this, strange. Because one of the biggest criticisms of Alexander Zinchenko over the years has been that he's too forward-thinking, that he's too focused on drifting into midfield, that he tries to play sometimes that killer pass a little bit too early and he takes risks and we get caught out. And on this occasion, I felt like every time he got the ball in the first half, with the exception of one cross that he put into the box from deep, he was like putting his foot on it, slowing the whole game down and just making a sign, a signal to everybody to say, like, kind of calm down. Was that Zinchenko overthinking his defensive deficiencies? We haven't seen that often. Whatever you want to say about the guy, he's normally super confident. But he was frustrating me in the first half because it felt like every time we were starting to build up a bit of tempo ahead of steam, he would just put his foot on the brakes and say, calm down.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like that might have been a bit of an instruction because, you know, we weren't at full tilt with our squad. We didn't have... So usually who'd be playing in that left-back position is if he was fit, would be Calafiori. And Calafiori is obviously a more robust defender. And if you allow Timber to bomb on like he does, you can... you've got that cover there, essentially, so you can take more risks. Whereas I think with Zinchenko, he was... this is just my suspicion. Obviously, I wasn't in the dressing room, obviously. but if he plays more risky passes and Timber bombs on as well, you're left in a bit of a difficult situation because you've got, you know, Man United's front three essentially running at Zinchenko, Kivior, and Saliba. So I think Arteta was probably a bit wary of that, to be honest. And I think that's why you saw that sort of very sort of safety first display in the first half, because we weren't at our game. Like you said, Gabriel usually would step up and be more aggressive, so we couldn't play that high line as we usually do. And I think it was more to do with that. But also, you know, you could say that Zinchenko has not played a lot of football. Maybe he's fallen out of sort of familiarity with this system because he doesn't play it as much, and the nuances of that and how they change week in, week out on the pitch. So there's a few things maybe, but I don't know if it was directly down to him being sort of cautious, like by himself, essentially.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming Zinchenko solely for what was a very underwhelming first half performance. I think that generally across the board, we were disappointing. But I didn't think his kind of, I don't want to use the term negativity because I don't necessarily think that's what it was. His cautiousness was a big frustration of mine, because if you're in the team, I want you to do what you're good at. And what you're good at is getting on the ball, pulling the strings, help us moving forward. And I think his role in that was even more important with Jorginho not in the side, who, for what it's worth, I would have started because I thought Thomas Partey looked really, really unfit in that first half. He really struggled in comparison to the level that we've sort of seen him perform at, in recent months, where he's arguably been Arsenal's best player. So that was my thoughts on Zinchenko. On Kivior, I thought in the second half, he sort of grew into the game. I thought he got better and better as the game went on. He made a sort of a chest back to David Raya after Raya made a save in the second half, and he celebrated it as if he'd scored a goal, which was incredible. I thought he did okay. Look, I think generally they both equipped themselves quite well, but Zinchenko had to come off when he did. As you say, he got skinned by Amad Diallo. He was on a yellow card, and that was a disaster waiting to happen. And I was glad to see Arteta sort of make a move to prevent any issues such as red cards, which have obviously bit us in the backside on many occasions this season. Just quickly before we finish off on the first half and we move on to the far more positive second half, what do you put that sort of lack of tempo, lack of zip, a lack of creativity in that first period down to? I think Zinchenko is one of the elements, but what was your kind of overall assessment of that first half performance? What did you feel was missing?
I think it's twofold, really. I think, first of all, our intensity wasn't there. And I think that's partly to do with how much energy we used on the weekend with that West Ham game. And, if we would have come away winning that 4-0, we could have, and we didn't concede those 2 goals. We could have taken players off. We could have rested them. But the fact that, we had to pretty much up until the 60th, 70th minute, it was a live situation. West Ham, if they were actually a good football team, could have tried to stage some sort of comeback. So I think that energy expended and then the quick turnaround just led us to be a little less sharper than we usually are, a little less intense. And yeah, I don't think anyone was on their game really. But also, I think it was Man United. I think Man United, they played an extremely defensive team. A back 5 plus Ugarte. They didn't go with Amad Diallo, who they've played is a winger playing wing back. He was on the bench. So they played Malacia, Dallo, and then the back 3. And I think that led to a sort of really difficult sort of game to break down essentially from Man United. And also, and we saw it against Inter, but not so much. But pressing a back 3, not to get too technical, but it's a bit more difficult because what I noticed was that Martinelli, Odegaard, and Saka pressed the back 3, but then Havertz would drop off. And usually you'd see all 4 pressing the back 4 because there's only 3 players. Havertz sort of dropped off to press Ugarte or Bruno Fernandes or whoever picked up the ball from the central midfielders. So I think we were slightly less aggressive in that sense, and we were less sort of willing to win the ball up high up the pitch, or we just didn't really know the optimal way to do that. Against Inter, it was different, obviously, because we had the majority of the ball and they were happy to give it to us. So I think that definitely culminated in a less aggressive sort of style of play and less turnovers, definitely. And yeah, overall, I think we were kind of working them out a little bit. We don't really know much about this Amorim team. I know we did play Sporting a few years ago in the Europa League, but we've not actually come up against this Amorim team. Well, we did come up against Sporting, obviously, but he was gone, wasn't he? So yeah, it was a weird one. I think that we were trying to work it out on the fly almost. And yeah, those 2 reasons, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a really good point. I think when you're trying to press a back 3 is different. You've got those 3 players in those more central areas. And what I noticed about Ruben Amorim's back 3 yesterday was that generally when you come up against a back 3, your right and left-sided centre-backs spread quite wide in order to try and push the wing-backs on. And it was almost as if Manchester United and Amorim took the decision of, let's not do that. Because in doing that, we could get picked off, we could get exposed. And if the turnover in possession happens, it takes too long to get everybody back into that compact shape. And what you saw was essentially it be a back 5 in that first half. And then, unless you commit 5 players to the press, how do you press a back 5 effectively without leaving massive gaping holes? And Manchester United have a goalkeeper in Andre Onana. Don't get me wrong. He gives the ball away a lot. And he does come across as a bit of I'm going to use the term clown. Like, I would hate to have him in between the sticks for my team because you just don't know what you're going to get from him. But he can pick out a pass. And he can clip it over the defense and into the midfield and set you off on an attack. That's one of his strengths. And I think you're right. I think Arsenal were trying to work it out on the fly. I also thought there was an air of cautiousness about the way that they approached it. And I don't know if that was something that Mikel Arteta instructed pre-game or if it's something that they figured out themselves during the game and then naturally kind of stepped off a little bit as a result of that. But it was tactically really, really interesting. I thought United were tidy in the first half without really threatening us. And I think if I was a United fan, I'll say it quietly, but I'd be quite happy with Ruben Amorim. I sort of, I didn't ask him a question because obviously covering the game for BBC London, my priority is to get the Arsenal reaction. But I was standing, 50 centimeters away from Ruben Amorim when he was giving his radio interview. And I thought he was really impressive. And, his English is still improving and stuff, but I thought he made his points really, really well. I think some of his points have been portrayed in the media this morning as being a little bit salty. But that's not what he was about the set pieces and stuff. He was praising Arsenal for them. He was highlighting some of the differences in the way that, they're allowed to be played in this league in comparison to others. I think he was just trying to make his point that, you know, it's something that he needs to figure out the best way to deal with. So first half was underwhelming. We agree with that. At halftime, what were your feelings? I was sitting there texting my brother, basically telling him that he jinxed the game, and that tells you everything you need to know about how I was feeling at the break.
Yeah, I was sitting there thinking, bloody hell, what am I doing with my life on a Wednesday evening watching this? So it's so boring. I was actually thinking, if I wasn't an Arsenal fan, I would have switched this off, because it was incredibly tactical and slow and trying to work each other out. And look, that is interesting for me in a sense, but also from an entertainment factor, there was nothing there. I don't think we had a shot on target in that first half. I know we had a few chances, and they mostly came from corners. But yeah, I thought United. I do agree with you. I thought they were tidy. I thought they were confident on the ball. I just thought penetration wise, they had like nothing to hurt us. You know, the wing backs weren't really involved in terms of like how you'd usually see wing backs. I think of the best wing back teams in Europe, and I'm thinking of, you know, Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen, and they got Alex Grimaldo and Jeremy Frimpong, and they are really, you know, direct and attacking. And I saw United's and Malacia and Dalot, and I thought, these guys are not going to hurt us. Like they can't really offer much going forward, really. I think that was down to us, but I think the overall composition of the team was a little bit strange. I know they did rotate heavily, but I just never really saw any patterns of play that was really going to threaten us. So I think that feeling and the fact that we were quite cautious just made it be a bit of a dud in the first half. Really.
Yeah, completely agree. I got to admit, I was surprised when I saw their team. When I saw that there was no Rashford, who's been in good form since Amorim's come in, that there was no Xerxes, who scored recently, that there was no Amad Diallo, who's probably been their best player, that there was no Casemiro. And after the game, Ruben Amorim told us that it was because he's asking a lot more of his players in terms of pressing. And, you know, he sort of looked at the data, and it showed that some of them, and these were his words, are struggling with it, and that he can't afford to have lots of injuries. So he clearly looked at this game and thought, Arsenal away don't give us much chance anyway. Let me use this as one of the games where I'm going to rotate. Anyway, let's move on to that second half. It was much better. There's much more positive things to talk about. But just before we get into that, it is the season of gifting. And just to let you know, we are gifting 10 Patreon memberships for a month over on our page. If you click the link in the description, you can claim yours. It's on a first come, first served basis, and given there's loads of content coming your way, with the games coming thick and fast, we felt now would be a great time to give you a glimpse of what you're missing. So click the link in the description to claim your free Patreon membership for the next month. We're giving away 10 for Christmas, but it is first come, first served, as I say, so don't waste any time. Get involved. And listen, people probably don't even like the content, so even if you're watching or listening to this back a couple of hours later, or a few hours later, or the next day, it's still worth clicking on, just in case people have snubbed them. So do check it out. Right, let's get on to that second half then. I felt, Mike, that when we came out for the second half, there was a lot more intensity. There was a lot more tempo. Mikel Arteta had clearly ripped into them at the break. One of my massive frustrations, I know I've voiced this before and it sounds like a broken record and all the rest of it. I can't stand when we've got a big game like that, and when the second half starts, half the stadium is still not in their seats. It winds me up. It creates such a flat, dull atmosphere, man. And I was looking at it and I was just fuming. I was so annoyed by it, because, look, there'll be people that genuinely need to go to the loo or genuinely need a bit of water or something. But there's so many that just go because they just want to have a beer. And it's like, what are you here for? The beer or the game? Like, prioritize the game. The team needs you. And when the players come out and they look around the stands and half of you are not back in your seats, it makes for a rubbish atmosphere. It causes a distraction, I think, as people are making their way back in. I just hate it. It winds me up. Anyway, that's that off my chest. What did you make of our start to the second half?
No, well, that's a pretty interesting point, to be honest. And I think, like, the atmosphere, we underestimate how much of a big role it plays in spurring the team on. And I think definitely over the last few years, Like, how many times a game do you see Odegaard try and pump up the crowd? Like, even, Martinelli, Gabriel does it a lot. And last night particularly, and I think once they show us something like they did in the first few minutes of the second half, we were willing to back them the whole way, because, we don't need a lot of encouragement. But after that first half, people were probably like, oh, bloody hell, like this is going to be a tough match. But the fact they came out of the blocks really fast really helped the atmosphere, and I think the atmosphere in turn helped pump them up. But yeah, what I think changed was just the intensity, and essentially, we didn't obviously make any subs. I just thought that we were quicker in, to press them. I thought, actually, conversely to what I was saying in the first half, Havertz did actually push on a bit higher in pressing in the second half. That definitely helped. And just doing things a bit quicker as well. We were a bit ponderous in the first half. And, maybe we looked at the Liverpool score, which I think at that time would have been 2-1 or 2-2, maybe. I can't remember exactly. But we would have been seeing that Liverpool were having a game, and it wasn't just going to be a procession. And maybe that sort of spurred them on and just said, look, we've got a real chance here to put some pressure on Liverpool and go out and beat this team who we should be beating. So yeah, a few things, but definitely 100% so much better from the first minute of that second half.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Let's talk about the set pieces then. What's the key, in your opinion, to us being so effective from these corners, and essentially impossible to defend against? Because I would go as far as saying that we are really, really good at these. Well, that's not really going that far. I would say that it's impossible to defend against us. If we have more than 10 corners, you're probably going to concede one. And there was a suggestion that Arsenal's wide players are, wanting to put the ball in the box first and foremost, but also quite happy to take corners, because we've created this thing where psychologically, I'm sure the opposition worry about it. I'm sure the goalkeepers are dreading it every time we go to take a corner kick. But what's it down to for you? Because, one of the big things has always been Gabriel. Yeah, he was in the team last night and we still managed to do it twice. So what's the key to Arsenal being so effective from these situations?
Yeah, I mean, the stats are like ridiculous. 22 goals from corners since the start of last season. That's more than any other team in the Premier League. And 10 of them have opened the scoring in that situation, which is huge. Like, going ahead with this Arsenal team usually means that we're going to win that game. But it has done in the last couple of seasons. So, like, I don't think we can underestimate how big a role it's played in how this team are doing. Because when you've got that 1-0 lead, obviously you've got something to build on and defend in some cases. So it's amazing. I think it's a whole bunch of things. I think that mentality thing you mentioned is definitely a thing now, because if you get even a little bit in the keeper's mind and you think, oh God, like, they're so dangerous, that one split second of questioning yourself or questioning the defenders around you can lead you to do something that you might not do. And I think the keepers are quite key in that situation, because if you've got a keeper who is really strong in the air, can come and command his box, you've got a bit more of a chance of defending it. Not saying that will solve everything, but that's a big thing. But for me, yeah, it's the consistency of delivery. It's Saka and Rice delivering it in the same sort of space within, literally the precision is like, it feels like it's within a meter or so every time. It's on that same square of grass every time. So the consistency to get that delivery is key. And then it's about switching it up and who you move to what particular post. And Saliba mentioned it in the post match with Amazon. He said, we don't want the opposition team to know how many we're going to put at the near post and how many we're going to put at the far post when they all run. So it's keeping teams guessing as well. And obviously there was that switch up, wasn't there, from last season where Ben White, and even the beginning of this season where Ben White would sort of occupy the goalkeeper. I think the rules have been slightly changed from PGMOL on that, haven't they? They're a bit more protective of goalkeepers in that sense. So we've had to change as well. And it's not just like we're doing the same thing constantly. We're always tweaking it, always evolving it. And that just leads teams to just think, okay, what can I actually do to stop this? And I don't know what the answer to that is. It's the $1 million question at the moment, isn't it?
It is, and you're absolutely right to highlight the variety point. I think that's the key for me. Yeah, we put the ball into similar areas, but there's so much variety to the way that we attack it. You know, we went through a phase where it was stick Gabriel on the penalty spot, use blockers at the front and near post, the near post and far post to try and create that corridor for him. And he'd run into that space, and 9 times out of 10, he'd win the header. And from that distance, from that angle, you're likely to score. I think the runs from the back post across the goal are really, really important, because the longer you've got to run, the easier it is to shake someone off that's marking you. And if the runs are all kind of crisscrossing between one another, you're going to create scenarios where defenders get in each other's way, and someone for a split second will lose their man, and bang, you're there to punish them. I think the near post stuff is really interesting. We obviously saw that last night for the first goal. We saw it at West Ham as well at the weekend. And I think with that, that's another kind of thing. I don't even necessarily think like last night that Timber, I know he scored, but I think Timber's instruction was get across the near post and just turn it towards the goal. Because as a defense, you're set in one position to defend the delivery from a certain angle. If the first contact comes from the attacking team, then the angle's different now. The ball's traveling in a different direction. And now the position that you were set in originally is not valid and is not going to help you defend that set piece. And obviously on that instance, it goes into the far corner. I'm not saying he didn't mean to score. What I'm saying is it's about getting the first contact at the near post. As I say, the runs across are really key, really, really important. You're right to highlight the deliveries as well, because they are so good. Like, they are so good, man. Like, they're right underneath the crossbar. And as a goalkeeper, you're trying to come through a sea of players to get something on it. And if you don't, it can literally go anywhere. And when you've got that many bodies in the box, you're that aggressive. Plus, the psychological thing that we seem to have created to contend with as a defender, it's really, really tough. Yeah, I just think we've been so good from them, so effective from them. And as you say, we know why we're so good at them. Like, we've just pinpointed all the reasons that make Arsenal so effective from these situations. But none of us can come up with a reason or a way of stopping it. And that's the thing. Like, we've literally nailed this. And Nicolas Jova deserves immense credit, but also so do the players, because they're carrying out these instructions. They've obviously taken the time to learn what the principles of our set piece plays are, and they're carrying it out to a T pretty much every week. Is amazing. Moving on to kind of man of the match. Declan Rice got the man of the match officially, from what I understand. Would he have been your choice?
I think between him and Timber, I think. But yeah, Declan Rice, I thought that was his best performance of the season so far, definitely. And we were speaking about him last week, and when we did our player ratings, I don't think we were particularly effusive in our praise of him. But yeah, he was back to his best. What's that?
That's a great word, by the way.
Effusive. Yeah, it's good. Thank you, mate. It's one of my ones that I pull out every now and then, but don't want to drop that in the pub or anything. But on a podcast like this, the highest echelon of podcast, I've got.
When you're with sophisticated company.
Well, mate, I
don't know where they are, but
no, your analysis of the coordinates, I was like, bloody hell, this guy's been doing his research. Wow.
You're lucky I didn't get the diagrams out.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut across you. I have to
all good.
Vocabulary.
Yeah, Declan Rice. Best performance of the season, because I think, and look, we've been questioning, is it a fitness thing? Is it, what is holding him back? What is stopping him being this energetic, relentless running machine that really pushes us forward? And maybe he is just back to full fitness now. We can start to see those types of performances. But yeah, like, first half again, like, in tune with the rest of the team. I think, a bit risk averse, a bit struggling trying to work out who to press, where to press in that Man United team. But second half, when that energy was up, a lot of that was because of him and his intensity. And I do like this number 8 role for him, because there was a moment in the second half where he just like carried the ball about 50 yards, and Martinelli was in front of him, but you just knew the ball was never going there. You just knew that he had that thing in his mind, that determination to just carry the ball and drive us forward. And for me, that is when Rice is at his best, carrying it forward and then also making up that ground to make those sort of last-ditch tackles to break up opposition counter-attack. So, yeah, I mean, he was just incredible. And then also, I would have to say Timber as well, because I think, again, we had that debate. Who would you play in a Champions League final, White or Timber? And I think the more I see Timber and the more he starts in that right back position, the more I think, wow, like this guy is unbelievable. Like again, the way he carries us forward and his technical ability paired with the physical capabilities, it's just so good. And he seems like one of these players that again is reliant on fitness because he's always going at 100 miles an hour. But then he does have that element of being able to slow it down and play with grace as well. So he's just, really, really good. I'm really glad for him to get his first goal, obviously. But more than that, I thought he was really involved in the build-up and pushing on and attacking as well. So, yeah, but those two, really, really good.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think those are the two that you would sort of champion for the Man of the Match award. I thought Rice was really good in the second half. I agree with you that he was kind of in tune with the rest of the team in the first half. But with Rice, I'm willing to give him a bit of a pass on the first half because I just wonder if he was worried or instructed even to just be a little bit more risk averse because we had a massive weakness on the left side of our defense. I just wonder if that was playing on his mind because we talk loads about him being this like left 8 nowadays and us trying to use him in an attacking sense just as much as we do in a defensive phase. But I just think naturally Declan Rice is a defensive player. Like I think that's what he's been brought up to be. He was a centre-back at the start of his career. Then he was a defensive midfielder. And as he's sort of progressed at Arsenal, he's sort of moved through the team into more advanced areas. But I still think he's always got that natural inclination to think defence first. And I think he would have been worried about what was behind him. We didn't have that same stability that you do when it's Gabriel and Calafiori, for instance, or Gabriel and someone. And I think he was wary of protecting, but also, he wanted to facilitate Martinelli getting forward and stretching them, which was probably another element of our game plan. So Rice's role was a bit of a difficult one last night, but in the second half, he just seemed to just think, F it, I'm just going to go and do what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm just going to charge around the pitch. And maybe more than him looking great in terms of like technical level, he just looked fit again. And for a long period of this season, he hasn't looked fit. And then he broke his toe and he was playing through that. And, so it feels like he's maybe come out the other side of that now. And hopefully he's going to push on and kick on. I would give it to Timber just because I thought defensively he was flawless and he scored. And I know Declan Rice put in a brilliant delivery for the goal, but Timber got the goal, which ultimately broke the deadlock and set us on our way to the victory. So that's what I'm going to go with. Just to wrap up on the show, Mike, I've got a couple of questions from X actually, which I'll just throw at you very, very quickly. But before we do that, circling back to the title chat, do you think it suits us being the chaser rather than the one that's being hunted down?
Yeah, I think so. Because obviously we did throw away an 8-point lead previously. And I don't think, from my perspective anyway, I think you're always better off maybe not being as far behind as we are, but kind of the focus not being on you, because being top comes with ultimately so much pressure, and I think pressure is the main thing. We've seen this team cope better and better with pressure, I think, and having that sort of scrutiny on us, but I think it's still certain situations, and I know there's lots of caveats to this, but there has been times this season where we've been in the lead and screwed it up, or red cards or soft goals given away, conceding after going in front. There has been elements of that. So I just think when you are chasing rather than being chased, you're in a bit of a better position. Obviously it's not in your hands that way, and I think that the difference is with this Liverpool team is that no one expected them to win. So it's almost like this season obviously is a huge opportunity for them because of how it's come about, but no one would have expected them to win the title. So they've almost got not a free hit, but they've got a season where if they win, it will be like an incredible achievement. Whereas we, on the other hand, I feel like the pressure is on us. And this is the difficult thing, because it's like, we should be at the peak of this project really by now. We're 5 years into it. We've had title run-ins for the last 2 seasons. The first one perhaps maybe a bit more unexpectedly. And we should be the team really, if Man City are going to drop off, to win that title. So I think there's pressure in that alone. So if we were top and having the gap that Liverpool have, I think the pressure would be insane. And I don't know about you, but for me, last season it was a great season, but there was something about being top and having that expectation that you were going to win. Yeah. It makes it a little bit unenjoyable, the games, because you can't sit back and just like really enjoy it, and like we did do in previous seasons where we were maybe challenging for 4th and unexpectedly went on a title challenge. But it comes with that caveat that every goal you concede and like every chance you miss, it just feels like so important. So
it feels like the world's crumbling down around you every time you concede a goal.
Exactly.
It's a problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just a couple of things from X. David Raya getting a lot of praise. What did you make of David Raya's performance? He didn't have a great deal to do, but when he was called into action, he did everything right.
Yeah, he made that brilliant save. But to be honest, you wouldn't have heard this, but the commentators really hammed it up. They were like, "Oh, it's an amazing." I thought his save was a bit Hollywood, to be honest. It was a bit Ramsdale-esque from the De Ligt header I'm talking about. It looked spectacular in the moment, but it wasn't really in the corner. Wasn't hugely. Look, it was really important, and it was a save that he should make, I guess, rather than a sort of incredible save that we've seen from him in the past. Like my best like David Raya moments are the double save against Aston Villa, things like that. I think like where your reactions are tested, are like where he's best. But I think overall, Harry, like we're talking about Andre Onana's composure under pressure and his distribution, but Raya, especially playing with Kivior, who did give him some dodgy balls at times. I thought his ability to sweep up, but also just keep that temperature low in a game like that, where really one mistake could really get the opposition team on you, especially when they've got 3 forwards as well. And his left foot distribution and right foot and short passing, long passing, it like he was faultless last night essentially. And he's just like, I think if you are going to win a title, you can't have the question marks over the keeper. And there at the beginning of last season. Let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago. And now to just not have that is such a huge boost.
Yeah, completely agree. Just finally, Mike, before we wrap up, a lot of people on X saying that Saliba put in one of his best performances in an Arsenal shirt yesterday. Obviously, he didn't have Gabriel alongside him, which makes a big difference. But he did everything right as well, didn't he? I mean, he scored with his bum. When you score with your backside, it means you're having a good night, doesn't it?
Yeah, things are going right for you. Yeah. Just like Rolls Royce again, and we're talking about it in the other pod we did recently. Sort of like the Rolls Royce versus the I'm trying to think of a car that's, I don't know, Dodge, some big American muscle that I can compare Gabriel to. That sort of smoothness and that ability to sweep up and deal with situations in a really smooth manner that doesn't leave you panicking at all, like some defenders do. And doing that, as you say, especially without Gabriel, is such a huge thing, because centre backs are all about partnerships, and yeah, he sort of really helped out Kivior and made his night a lot easier, I think. And one thing I noticed as well that he does from time to time, but yesterday did a lot more, is that, and maybe because we weren't as sort of proactive on the ball, he really pushed forward quite a few times with the ball and charged forward, and a bit like Matip did for Liverpool, went on those bursting runs. I think if we can see that from Saliba a little bit more, I wouldn't mind that, because it just sort of, the opposition aren't going to mark him. Then they're going to think, what's this geezer doing? He's a centre back. What's he doing? Sort of bursting up the pitch. But I don't mind that. I think something to disrupt a low block or something, or in a game where you're struggling. I enjoyed that. So yeah, just he's a 8 out of 10 every week, I would say. But this week he was a 9 or 9.5. Just really solid.
Yeah, and I agree with that point about him coming out of the defence. As long as you've got the sufficient cover to make sure that if it goes wrong, you're protected, then I'm fine with that. I think dribbling is one of the things that's disappeared from football. And for me, it was one of the most beautiful things in football. And it really frustrates me that, it's almost been coached out of the game in a lot of ways. I think dribbling not only means that you have the possibility of getting past someone and progressing down the pitch, but it also draws attention, because once you beat the first man, the opposition start to look at you and think, shit, I need to come across and deal with this. And you can very easily drag 3 or 4 players into the mix. That's one of the things that Gabby Jesus did so well when he arrived. And we used to talk about the space that Saka, Odegaard and Martinelli were getting. And a lot of the time it was because Jesus would go on a dribble. He'd have 4 or 5 players around him because they'd all panic. People want to stay in shape. They want to stay compact. They don't want to be dragged out of position. And dribbling does exactly that. So I think you're right. It's an important element of the game that shouldn't be lost. And unfortunately, it feels like it's heading that way. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let people know where they can follow you.
Yeah, I'm not really on X these days. I've not been on there for a while. So yeah, Blue Sky. If you go over to Chronicles, I'm sure I'm tagged somewhere there. But it's just Mike_Stavrou if you search it.
Do you think this Blue Sky thing is going to take off? Because the first couple of weeks, it felt like everybody was on it. I opened an account on there as well. But then I just wonder if it's going to be another Threads and everybody's going to end up back on X again. How do you see it?
No, I think there's been enough. Yeah, I think because it's been leaving X or Twitter to go there. I would say there's more chance, because I think there's definitely people like me who don't go on X anymore and are just looking for something new. Whereas Threads, I sort of felt like people had both and were waiting to see whether Threads was going to take off before coming off Blue Sky. But that's mostly because they're different, right? Like Threads is within Instagram, and it just doesn't really lend itself to a sort of Twitter. Whereas literally Blue Sky looks like Twitter, doesn't it?
Yeah,
essentially,
it does. It looks like
it's kind of like.
It looks like it 5 years ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The good old days. That's it. Right. Mike, thank you so much. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. We'll begin our build up to the trip to Fulham, of course. Big game coming up on Sunday. Can Arsenal continue their winning run? They need to, really, if they're going to close the gap further on Liverpool. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back soon. Until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.